is fidelity, even in the sign of our infidelity. Right? So fidelity is a sign of that grace or of that covenant between Christ and his church. Fruitful, life-giving, forever and ever. He answers us, right? There's a growth within Christ. It's supposed to be. Unless we turn into an atheist in later lives. Those are the marks of that relationship or that covenant. So when a couple comes and approaches the church for marriage, and we've gone through all different kinds of jumping through hoops and trying to establish, are they free to marry, what kind of a marriage it's going to be, what are the terms according to the church of what that marriage needs to look like, all of that kind of stuff. They come to the altar, and the bride is radiant, and the groom has got stars in his eyes, hopefully, and he sees her walking up the aisle, and he kind of gets silly and all that kind of stuff. And the priest or the deacon or the bishop, the minister of the church, the very first thing that he asks them after hearing the gospel, and in the case of Father Michael, a long-winded homily. Sorry. Cut that from the tape.
Too late to go to watch that.
He asks them a series of questions. And I want you to listen to these questions very, very carefully and tell me what it is that we're asking this couple. Gary and Bernadette, I'm just going to throw you one out for
That's fine.
Have you come here freely and without reservation to give yourselves to each other in marriage? And the couple answers, yes. Okay. Will you love and honor each other as man and wife for the rest of your lives?
I would.
Yes, we will. Will you accept children lovingly from God and bring them up according to the law of Christ and his church? We talked about all of the things that would make a marriage invalid. Are those contained in those three questions? Did you come here freely, without reservation, to give yourselves to each other in marriage? Are you willing to establish this covenant out of your freedom? Let's talk about fidelity. Let's talk about faithfulness. Let's talk about those marks of that covenant relationship. Will you love and honor each other? That covers a whole multitude of sins, doesn't it? As man and wife for the rest of your lives. And will you accept fruitful? Will you accept children lovingly from God and bring them up according to the law of Christ and his church? Fruitfulness and growth. So we've established in those questions what it is that we're asking them to agree to with each other in establishing this covenant. Right? So that's the declaration of the covenant and their consent to the covenant. Everything else doesn't matter. Believe it or not. We go into some further questions.
I noticed they didn't have anything in there about how much money do you have.
No,
Right.
without reservation.
Exactly.
Right? So then we ask them to make a promise. To fulfill the terms of the covenant, this is what the promise is. I, Gary, take you, Bernadette, to be my wife. I promise to be true to you in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health. I will love you and honor you all the days of my life. So what are we asking them to promise? It's the terms of the covenant, right? We've established the covenant. If you come here freely, right, to give yourselves to each other in this, will it be fruitful? right? Without reservation. We're not holding anything back. We are willing to do this. All right, now tell me what it is you promise. I promise to be true to you. Fidelity. In good times and in bad, no matter what happens. Rules pretty much everything. Good times are the good times, right? The walking on the beach hand in hand and, you know, all of that. The bad times when you've got 5 kids and they're screaming at you and you can't even go to the bathroom or take a shower without one of them in there with you, right? Or one of you was very healthy or one of you was very sick. Or in later life, you develop some type of psychosis or something along those lines happened to you. Or an addiction. You know, you discover an addiction or you fall prey to an addiction.
Tim, it said that you promised to be true, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean more than fidelity?
Yes, it
I'm
does.
thinking that it would mean that you're not going to have secrets, keep things from the other, all those sort of things as well.
It has to be a full, life-giving,
We're sharing everything.
that's right,
That's what I thought.
unconditional love. You're not hiding it. Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
You're not lying to each other.
Terms and conditions, right?
Right. I will love you and honor you. Why do they split those 2 words out and say both? What's the difference between love and honor?
Quite a lot.
What did he say?
There's quite a lot of difference between love and honor. Is it possible to love a person and still not be able to live with a person? Yeah. Right?
And vice versa.
To honor a person and not love a
I
person.
think honor is also an act. I mean, it's a physical manifestation
Yeah.
of a
So it's
feeling.
love.
Next time we get together, I'm gonna go over the prenuptial agreement or investigation and actually give you the verbiage that backs that up as to what love and honor means. Because they talk about what the relationship, is this a life-giving relationship, good for you and for your spouse? Not just good for you, you know? It means that if she's a terrible cook, you're still gonna eat it. Or if he's a terrible cook, you smile and say, yes, dear, right? Do we have to have barbecue again?
Yeah, right.
There's so much that goes into
But
the
then
love
you're
and
not
honor.
being true.
In a way you are.
No,
You're being true to the fact that
I'd
I'm.
say, honey,
Depends on who the
this
cook is.
this one was not your best.
However, I eat it just because
I'm
I'm
going to eat it
honored.
because it tastes like love. Hey, how do you think I stayed married for 40 years? That's pretty crappy.
Okay, one last thing that we're gonna cover and then we're gonna break until next week. Once they go through those promises, right, they declare their consent to enter into the covenant, they express the terms of the covenant, which we refer to as their vows, but they're really the promises, right? Then we have to have a very formal recognition of that consent. So for a second, I want you to think of the covenant that God made with Abraham. And the terms of the covenant were pretty clear, but receiving the consent, or the reception of the consent, was pretty bloody. Because what he did was he split a bunch of animals in half and he laid them out, and then he kept the birds from eating them up. And then God accepted that consent, or received that consent, by passing through like a smoky pillar or a smoking pot, walking between the 2 halves of the animals. There was a formal recognition of what that consent looked like. Well, if you went back 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 years, they were pretty elaborate in making sure that we understood what receiving that consent meant.
Oh, sure.
Because in that case, that covenant says, if you violate this covenant, this is going to happen to you. Right? This is my example to you of what the terms of the covenant mean to me. So the reception of the consent has to be very verbal on the part of the church to accept this placement of this covenant. And so the words that come from the priest or the deacon or the bishop are, you have declared your consent, listen to this word, before the church. The Lord in His goodness, may the Lord in His goodness strengthen your consent and fill you both with His blessings and grace. What God has joined, man must not separate. Okay? But you've declared your consent, you formed this covenant, and who was the witness? The church. And the bishop or the priest or the deacon is there simply as the representative of the church. The sacrament is not conferred on a person by the priest or the bishop or the deacon. He is only there to accept their consent to form an indissoluble covenant based on certain promises with each other.
And therefore, the ministers of the sacrament are the man and the woman.
The ministers, not just the matter, but the ministers of the sacrament of marriage are the husband and wife.
Right.
The man and the woman. Very different
God says it should.
than the other 6 sacraments.
God says it should.
So you don't marry a couple, you witness.
I witness their marriage. I celebrate their marriage with them.
Confirm their bond, is what we said earlier, right?
Witness their bond.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a good word.
that's it. So what is marriage? Marriage is a little bit different than what we understand, right? That's why it's also critical to understand what we mean by, a man and a woman alone. And we'll get into all of that. Why they have to be the part or parties of the marriage. Because of this bond of being fruitful, right? And fidelity. There has to be that part of the bond as well. But the roles, who is the sacrament, what is the signs and symbols of the sacrament, what is the matter, what is the form, and who is the minister of the marriage. All makes a big difference in understanding everything else that we try and throw at it. You had a question.
Well, I was just wondering, of course, he married my daughter and son-in-law, and my son-in-law was not Catholic. And at the time, I was just so concerned because we didn't have communion at the Mass, but now you're saying, why do you, I guess, for Catholics, you offer, communion for everyone because...
There's 2 forms that the marriage can take place. One is a full Mass and one is marriage outside of Mass. And it depends an awful lot on what the wishes of the bride and groom are as to that. Normally, if it's 2 baptized Catholics entering into the marriage, you will always have a Mass. But you don't have to. But the encouragement is, well, you're both Catholic, so what is your argument why you don't? Well, we want to get to the reception room. Is the marriage about the reception or is the marriage about marriage, right? So you ask them those questions, right? But between a Catholic and a baptized Catholic and a baptized non-Catholic, well, half of them that are the people that are going to come to the wedding are not going to have a clue as to, what are you guys doing? What is the Mass? Why are we here?
Right.
Well, we're here strictly to focus on the establishment of the covenant and who establishes that covenant and who witnesses it. So does that answer?
Yeah, it makes it more clear. I didn't understand at the time. I
And
thought-
in this
I thought they were
case,
getting something
where you have a disparity of cult, I've never seen that celebrated within a Mass.
Well, Bernadette and I got married because there was no Mass. My daughter married a baptized Methodist, I think. And we over at St. John Newman. And I can tell you that the non-Catholics in the bunch, they enjoyed it as much as we did. Now I got to tell you, Father Garrity, he left out the part of the I believe in a holy ecumenical Catholic Church. He left that out when we were saying the prayer. But otherwise, it was a regular Mass, and of course they didn't go for communion.
Yeah.
But afterwards, they were saying, how beautiful they thought it was.
It can be used as an evangelical tool,
Yeah, it is.
evangelization.
Yeah. I think we may have converted it one or two.
But a lot of them will say, no, I don't want to put somebody through that.
Excuse me.
Yeah, He's got me sitting there.
I have a question about marriage without minister from, cleric or whatever from.
Like somebody from the
official-
county building
Yeah,
or a
exactly.
justice of the peace or
Yeah.
whatever.
Exactly. So
We don't view that as a sacramental marriage.
Yes, exactly. So what name do you have for that? What do
It's a natural marriage.
okay.
We have two types, a sacramental marriage or a natural
Yeah,
marriage.
so it's still marriage.
It's still a marriage,
Right.
and if the marriage persists and they
Mhm.
wish to have it sacramentalized,
Right.
then they bring it to the church, and then we do what we call a convalidation,
Yeah.
which is a method of bringing that marriage into the church itself. And we have them express their consent as a new consent to be received by the church.
Now that one we just went to, where the guy got baptized, confirmed, and
Married all at the same time.
Now, I know him, I didn't know him that well, but I ended up being his,
His best man, his witness.
something like that.
Yeah. You represented the church. Along with Father, yeah, along with Father Michael, you were the church. We consider marriage to be so special of a sacrament, and in previous history, so much of our law, physical law, depended on marriage for rights and responsibilities of people, that not only did we want the church minister to witness it, but we wanted others to be sure that they witnessed it and could testify that a marriage took place. A full 25% of the code of canon law of the Latin Church involves marriage. Did you know that?
Not surprised.
25%. And you know why? Because it was written over 2,000 years, and there was forced marriages, arranged marriages, one kingdom to another, nieces and nephews getting married, first and second cousins getting married, all of this stuff for the sake of who succeeded who to a throne.
There you go.
And so there's so many individual laws about marriage in the Code of Canon Law. You could be a canon lawyer in marriage, and you would have to go to school for a great deal of time to figure all that out.
Wow.
Well, you take 1500 AD, right in the middle where Europe was almost 100% monarchies.
Right.
That explains it right there.
So when you sit there and you look at that, what we'll get into is why can the church, or what is the meaning of an annulment? And what does the church do in those cases for an annulment? But a lot of it has to do with that Code of Canon Law, but it also has to do everything with what we've talked about here is, were you free to enter the relationship, or did you enter the relationship 100% out of your freedom or not? And did you fulfill the terms of the form in front of a minister in a church?
Are you going to cover what the church thinks of children of marriage that's been annulled?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, talk about it later.
Yeah.
This may be for next week, but a sacrament is instituted by Christ. Not that there was a specific moment, but at what time did Christ institute the sacrament of marriage?
Well, there's two of them. The first one is in Cana.
Is that what, that's what I
But the
was-
second one was that a man came up, I think it's in the Gospel of Matthew, and the man came up and he says, they're talking about the brother-in-law having to marry the wife that was barren and this, that, and the other thing, and he says, well, even, at one point in that exchange, he says, well, even Moses allowed for divorce. What do you think about that? And Jesus says, Moses allowed for divorce because you're a stiff-necked people. And it's not what is intended for marriage. And he was very, very explicit. And then he says, this whole idea, if you divorce your wife, you condemn her to a life of adultery, and if she divorces you, she condemns you to a life of adultery, and this, that, and the other thing. and he was very specific about addressing marriage all through his ministry. The woman at the well, you know, when you look at that exchange, you know, and he sits there and he says, he asks her, he says, well, where's your husband? And she says, well, I have no husband. And he says, you're right, you don't have a husband because you've been married 7 times, right? And so that exchange even elevates marriage to that point of saying this is something very special because Christ took so much time within his ministry, within the different gospels, constantly to address these issues of marriage with the people he was teaching and talking to.
Well, what about the woman that had to marry all the brothers?
Yeah, well, that was kind of
That was
that's kind of like going to, you know, when I went to Catholic school, we loved George Carlin, he was so funny. And he put this album out, or he had this routine called I Used to Be an Irish Catholic, right? And then, but he says, you know, we used to love in elementary school because the priest would come in, the pastor would come into religion class once in a while. And we used to call it Heavy Mystery Friday. And you would ask questions like, so, it's Saturday night, 2 minutes to midnight. Or it's Sunday night, 2 minutes to midnight. And you're on a ship at sea. And you haven't been to Mass. But then you cross the international date line. And, you know, they would build up all of these layers and layers. If you didn't go to Catholic school, you probably missed out on Heavy Mystery Friday, you know. And then, you know, and at the very end, you always said, would that then be a sin fata? You know? And, yeah, you know, we'll talk about that.
Timing's everything.
It's a heavy mystery, it's a mystery, you know. So, the whole thing about all of the brothers was one of those kind of questions that was posed to Jesus. You know, can God make a rock so big that even he can't pick it up, you know? Those kind of things. But it was a test of Christ to say, if you believe in the afterlife or in the resurrection, and the Sadducees didn't believe in the resurrection at all. They thought that when you died, that was it. And Jesus, and you know, they're mainline Jews saying there's no resurrection. You just kind of go into this deep sleep for all eternity. Jesus says, you know, there is resurrection. And he says, okay, so let's trip this guy up. And we're going to trip him up because we're going to say, well, you know, part of our law is that if a man dies childless, that his brother or brother-in-law is supposed to take the wife in marriage and raise up children for the deceased man. So there was this woman, and she went through 7 brothers in a similar manner. I'd hate to be a member of that family. I'd be condemned to death before. So, but the whole idea was, you know, to say, you can't have resurrection because whose wife would she be in the afterlife?
Right.
You know, and the point was, well, the angels don't take husbands and wives. You know, when you're in heaven, when you're a saint, you're not married. But you recognize there's this recognition. Sure. So it was one of those heavy mystery times. Let's see how far we can push this.
Tim, we're running out of time, but I want to say, Sister said that the marriage was established in the Garden of Eden.
It was. Actually, it was established in the Garden of Eden. Yeah. It was established between when God took Eve from his side and made her a helpmate. Now, I'm going to get into that next week, too. What that word helpmate means is very, very interesting. Okay, let's say a prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, you established marriage to give us to each other and to build up your church, to give us the grace to share with others in the building up of your kingdom. Help us always to remember that you gave us things not only for ourselves and for our great joy, but you gave us these things to help build up your kingdom on earth. We ask that you give us the strength and the courage to introduce you to others in our daily life. And we ask this through Christ our Lord.
Amen.
Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.